How do you go through a new airport if you're about to travel and not feel like you're out of place or rushed or don't know what you're doing? Or have you ever had a super tight situation at an airport where you land and you're running to the next gate and it's just super stressful? The day of stress, is really like when you're traveling, right? Once you get to the resort, it's usually going pretty well. But the initial getting there and coming home on a trip can be really stressful. So that's what we are talking about today, is how do you prep for your travel day so that you can feel like you're going to have an absolutely great vacation. If you do not know me, I am Mandy Horn, the Traveling Compass. You can find me across all your major social media channels as that. And I am a travel advisor that helps their clients travel smart so they can connect while they are on vacation to the destination and those they love. Today, we are talking about that day of travel, those jitters you get when you have to kind of navigate new airports and do all of that. And in fact, I am prepping for an international trip next week. I am excited about it. Do any of you all ever get super nervous? When you have to travel through a new airport? I am traveling through a new airport. Because I'm doing an international flight from where I live in the U.S., that is going to mean, generally speaking, a connecting flight. And I'm going to have a layover in Fort Lauderdale, which I have not personally, I don't think, done a layover in Fort Lauderdale before. So I'm bringing you along in the process for what I do to prep for my own personal trip this week so that you can see what you could do to relieve the stress and really be truly ready for your day of travel. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I've already done it, is download my boarding pass to my phone and to my email. I always choose both options if the airline offers both, because I've had sometimes some issues where it doesn't truly download to my Apple Wallet or the app for the airline in a way that I feel like really makes sense. Like I can pull it up and it's not right, or it's off, or something's wrong. I found that the email options where I can pull it up via email and save it or then add it to my Apple Wallet or wherever works a lot better sometimes and is a little bit more reliable. So I always choose both options if I have the option for an electronic boarding pass to have it both ways on my phone so that I don't run into a problem at security where I don't have what I need. Never fun to be shuffling last minute for what you need. So download your boarding pass so that you have it, or if you're old school, print it out. If you feel better with paper, totally fine too. And some airlines do charge to print you one at the airport, so that's something you may want to consider doing at home if possible. Otherwise, you can print them they'll print you one when you get your luggage or whatever, when you check in at the airline. So after you have that, we're going to talk about how you find your way through a new airport. Now, you need to find out what your layover airport is, look at your schedule, and figure out where you're going, as well as your layover times. Now, I personally am headed to Fort Lauderdale, and so I need to look up the Fort Lauderdale airport, and I have a layover of about an hour when I go. So first thing I did was to go ahead and find a map. And this is a map that I'm going to save to my phone so that I have it on there. And this is something you can always do if you're headed to several different airports on your travel, is save a copy of a map to your phone. It's way faster than trying to find it somewhere else. And especially if you're like in those in-between times, like when you're walking off the plane or doing other things, you always have access to it. And then you don't have to find the nearest one once you get there. It kind of helps you orient more quickly, especially looking at it ahead of time. So like this is the Fort Lauderdale airport. And I'm going to look at a picture of the map of the airport before I go. And I'm going to save it to my phone, like I said. But then I'm also going to create a picture in my mind. Since I've not been to this one before and it's not just a natural feel to me on how to navigate it, I'm going to look at it and go, okay, based on the shapes or other things, I can kind of mentally picture it. Now, in this case, Fort Lauderdale is made up of several different terminals. If I had to transition between terminals, I would think, this kind of looks like a hand. And I would make it into a vision in my mind of, okay, here's terminal 1, here's, these other terminals. And that's how I'm going to think of it in my mind as I have to figure out where I'm going next. Now, on this particular itinerary, having done a little research, I'm not going to end up switching between terminals. I'm going to be in terminal 1. So I don't have to create too big of a picture. I'm headed on a U is basically where I'm headed. So it helps me understand what I'm going to be doing. So after I've kind of created a picture in my mind of where I'm going to look at the terminals to determine if I will possibly have a terminal change on my itinerary. And most airlines and most airports, if you look on the airport site or just do a little Google image search, you can come up with which airlines tend to be in which terminals. Now, it's not foolproof. Sometimes things happen, but generally speaking, they tend to be in those terminals, and you can determine what your path will be. If that airline is in multiple terminals, you have a possibility of having to move between terminals. If it tends to only really be in one, you have a high likelihood of not having to switch. If you are connecting from a domestic flight to an international or reverse, that almost always necessitates a terminal change, but a lot of the time, even if the airline is only listed in one terminal, there is an international portion and you have to go to a separate place for that. So those are high likelihoods of a terminal change. Not always, but sometimes it does in fact happen. So after you look at the map, you want to locate the terminals, see which airlines are in which terminals. And then the next thing I'm going to check for is security checkpoints. Now, on my itinerary, Southwest tends to maintain a Terminal 1 status in Fort Lauderdale, which is who I happen to be flying. So I am most likely going to be in Terminal 1. And I did some digging and found that, in fact, it looks like most of the international departures from Fort Lauderdale also for Southwest also happen out of Terminal 1. Different if you're arriving, but for departures, it looks like I will be able to probably transition between two concourses within Terminal 1. Then after looking at the map in a little bit more detail on the website for Fort Lauderdale, the next thing I'm going to be looking at is security checkpoints. And when I looked at the security checkpoints, I was disappointed to find that I will most likely be going through security again, which I absolutely hate. And I wish airports would have better thoroughfares where you're cleared if you've already been through security. But such is not the case with Fort Lauderdale. So even though I'm maintaining the same terminal, I will most likely have to clear security again. This is a bummer for me because I have a tight layover. Like I said, I have an hour layover, which is not a lot of time. But thankfully, having looked at the map and looked at the security checkpoints, at least, even though I'm going to have to clear security again, I know that there's no internal transportation I'm going to have to take. So what often happens at some larger airports is that to switch terminals or to go between an international and a domestic terminal, you have to take an internal transport, whether that's a tram, whether that's a bus, something, you'll have to take internal transportation. And that adds extra time. It always adds extra time to have to wait and navigate that and figure it out. But thankfully on this trip at Fort Lauderdale, I'm staying in the same terminal. If I was transitioning between terminals, I would have to take their internal transportation. So something for me to know if I was going through there. But on this trip, I don't have to take any. Like I said, I already checked the international terminals, but that's what you would check for are there specific places for international or domestic that I'll have to go to in order to get there? Like, for instance, in Atlanta, there's a specific international terminal, and pretty much no matter where you come in on a domestic flight, you're going to have to take their internal tram to get to the international destination terminal. So just things to know as you're planning out your layover time and whatever. So lucky for me, I don't have to take internal transport. I am just going to be switching terminals and clearing security again. Now, what that tells me, since I only have an hour layover, for a domestic flight, typically they board about 30 minutes in advance. For an international flight, it's usually 45 minutes to an hour in advance that they will start loading the plane. Since I only have an hour layover, that means I am basically going to be getting off one plane and getting on the next, which means it would be a good idea for me to sit close to the front of the plane on my flight to Fort Lauderdale so that I can easily exit, try to get through security and get to my next flight so I can board the plane. Especially with Southwest, it's going to matter what boarding group I'm in. So I want to get there as soon as possible to make sure that I can get the seat I want. So all those things I'm thinking through in my mind. Where do I want to sit on the plane? If I get a choice, what am I going to do? I'm going to exit the plane. I'm betailing it to try to get to the next one, going through security again, and then I'm going to be headed on to the next terminal to board my plane. That also means that I'm probably not going to have time to stop to eat. And knowing that means I'm going to pack some food so that I don't reach that next stop like ravenously hungry, or I'm tempted to stop and have to buy something when I really don't have time. So if you have time in your layover, you could pick a place to eat. And I like to look at the terminals and kind of determine what's there, what might sound good, what might not, versus like just kind of wandering around a terminal trying to figure it out. I'd rather know kind of what my options are and pick things that are relatively easy for me to eat, on my itinerary. So I will probably be packing my own food to try to make my next flight. Then after that, I am pretty well set. I kind of know mentally where I'm going. The international airport I'm flying into is Cancun, which I've been to before, so I feel pretty prepared for that, although I am headed to a new terminal. But I know that once I get there, I'll be going through immigration and customs, and I'm going to prep for that by making sure that if there's an online tourist card, which there is for Mexico, I'm going to go ahead and get that done so that I'm all ready to go. If you do not have that option, I'm going to make sure that I have a pen in my carry-on and that I have the address and phone number of where I'll be staying, because a lot of customs forms ask for it, and I don't want to have to be like digging through my stuff to try to figure that out. Sometimes I save it to my phone. Sometimes I just write it on a card that I can easily reference while filling out the customs form. But either way, I want to be prepped to get out of there as quickly as possible and to my destination. I don't really like spending any more time in airports than I have to. So all of those things, again, to run through them like completely, like what I would do to prep to go through a new airport. Make sure you download your electronic boarding pass if that's an option, in a way that you're comfortable using it. Go ahead and find your airport online and check your layover time so you know what you're doing. Pull up your map of your resort or of your airport so that you know where you're going if you've not been there before, so you know how to navigate it. Save it to your phone to save time and for your reference during travel. Create a picture in your mind of what that airport map looks like. That will help you navigate it quickly and not be struggling to locate objects and figure out where things are. And then go ahead and look at your terminals, determine whether or not you will have to have a terminal switch. Look for airlines, where they're located at that particular airport. Check for security checkpoints, and if you will most likely have to clear security again. Also, that means like while you're flying, you can check and make sure that your bag is packed appropriately to easily clear security again. I can already, when I'm getting off my last plane, make sure I take off any belts or whatever and just shove them all in my bag so I can quickly clear security that second time. Then I'm going to check for internal transportation, see if I have to take any internal transportation at the airport and plan accordingly in my time pattern. And if I'm not familiar with it, I may look up a little thing about it so I have an idea of how to use it. And then I'm going to check for any international terminals. If I'm having to go to a specific place, if I'm on an international flight, I want to know what that terminal is, how to get there, and what I need to do, in order to get to my next flight quickly. Then I'm going to pick places to eat if I have time, or if I don't, I'm going to make sure I pack food for myself. And then finally, I'm going to prepare for customs and immigration by making sure that I have a pen in my carry-on and the address and phone number of where I'm staying, or that I have done the online tourist card options online if that country offers it. So I hope this was helpful to you today. I hope it preps for your next international trip. I'm really excited to be bringing you guys some new stuff in the next week and beyond as I get to travel to Mexico. Super excited about this trip. I'm going to be seeing about 10 different properties and going to a conference to, learn more things about how to bring you the best in travel. Super excited for that. You'll be looking for new stuff coming your way shortly. Again, I am Mandy Horn, the Traveling Compass. You can find me across all your major social media channels as that. And I have appreciated getting to spend time with you today. If you have any questions, leave me a comment below and I'd be happy to answer them. Travel smart, guys. See you soon.